The One Big Beautiful Bill recently signed into law delivers an expansion of resources for the Trump administration's efforts to crack down on illegal immigration. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says the bill is a win for law and order and the safety and security of the American people. Joining us now to discuss is Mike Leon, Director of Strategy at the Free and Equal Elections Foundation and host of Can We Please Talk podcast. And also joining us is Tony Kinnett, national correspondent for the Daily Signal and host of the Tony Kinnett Cast radio show and podcast. First of all, good afternoon to you both. Tony, I'll start with you today. The bill delivers an expansion of resources to these immigration efforts. So some numbers here for you, nearly $170 million for DHS with $46.5 billion for border wall completion, $14.4 billion for deportation, transportation. How would you characterize this level of investment in terms of, federal immigration enforcement? And has the big, beautiful bill changed the landscape for immigration enforcement?
So I think the second question is easiest to answer. As for changing the landscape on enforcement, I think that the execution of policy is almost far more important than the apportionment of funds to begin with. The executive branch has an incredible amount of leeway to spend monies allotted by Congress towards executive agencies as it sees fit. So I think that this is now going to be on the Trump administration for how these monies are spent. So Norm, you might expect me to take perhaps a victory lap on an expansion of funding. I'm more so interested in seeing the application of those funds carried out well. Now, to answer the first question as to what I think that this is built upon, realistically, this is built on the mandate from the people who across the United States, according to multiple polling sets that we have now months in, very much support not just deportation, but mass deportations. The majority of the country supports such policy. And I think that also it's a national security issue to have the border remain as porous as it is, given the failed state of Mexico, which has been almost completely taken over by the Sinaloa cartel, and the really dangerous situations, not just for Americans, but also those trying to come in legally and claim asylum, who are essentially being shoved aside by individuals related to these cartels. And then, of course, operating here in the country as well. I think that's really the basis for a lot of this. And the Big Beautiful Bill does help fund that.
Okay, Mike, let me get your view on the Big Beautiful Bill in the context of immigration enforcement.
Yeah, well, first off, good to see all of you guys and thoughts and prayers to everybody out there in Central Texas with all the floods. My thoughts on the One Big Beautiful Bill is like kind of what Tony said about appropriating funds. It's really how funds are used with respect to this. I mean, if you recall, and Don, you and I have talked about this before, during the Biden administration, there was Senator Langford's bill that would have tackled some of these issues with respect to hiring and more agents and helping with more enforcement across the border. That obviously never passed through Congress. So now within this bill, we just have a lot more money that's being allocated towards this. I'm kind of with Tony on I'm with Tony on this specific part, and it's really about the enforcement part of this because if you recall, the Biden administration really, towards the end of 2024, the latter 6 months of 2024, really relied on Mexico's part of the enforcement part of this. That is where the stem of all of this, where the coyotes live, where everybody's making these passages and they eventually get to this bottleneck, which is Mexico. And we need to rely on those partnerships with the governors of those areas in Mexico and with obviously the Mexican president to be able to do their job to enforce the border. So that way we can properly vet who is coming into this country. So it's not really so much about the funds and hiring more agents. Maybe that's an overkill. Maybe that's an overspend with respect to this bill. Some of things could have been spent on other things, other parts of the United States that are potentially crumbling. But they decided to go in this direction and give this amount of money to this agency. They feel like this is a national security threat right now at this moment. And I really am with Tony. It's really about the policy and the subsequent actions, and really also about the vetting process and how do we eventually get somebody on the path to become a citizen in this country. Immigration's been broken over 40 years over any president. It doesn't matter which president has been in the United States. That's something that needs to be tackled and addressed later on. This episode of Can We Please Talk is presented by our friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Delicious tasting coffee since 2009. They've been our proud sponsor. You see the promo code there. Look at this. They sent me this beautiful kit right here. Listen to that. Listen to that seal coming out, right? What's in it? Environmentally safe, compostable K-Pods. I love the dark Mexican blend. You can go to their website right now, take the quiz, That quiz is going to put you with a flavor profile. Listen to that sound of the coffee that you're going to be matched up with. Go to freshroastedcoffee.com. Click the link right now in our show notes. You can see it right there. Click that link. It's going to take you to the site. When you get to checkout, use our promo code, Can We Please Get 20? All one word, Can We Please Get 20, 20. You're going to get 20% off your first purchase. Head to freshroastedcoffee.com, our official sponsor of the Can We Please Talk podcast.
Tony, let me get your thoughts on how you feel about Trump's current approach to immigration enforcement compared to what we saw in his first term. Are we seeing a fundamentally different strategy from Trump now? Is this Trump 2.0 on immigration? What do you think?
I think that he's addressing one of the key issues that a lot of Americans have with, for example, certain mayors of large cities who've created these sanctuary cities, which many have argued is a violation of federal law when you have individuals like Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles, who doesn't even have the time of day to approve certain rebuilding contracts and lift certain regulations for those rebuilding after the wildfires, but does have time to go down to the park and make sure that those who have been accused and, in fact, in many cases, indicted and released, which is a very wild thing to suggest, that have been indicted for crimes, everything from domestic abuse to repeated battery with a foreign object to kinds of sexual assault, that those individuals being arrested for breaking the law in sanctuary cities is a huge target for this administration. And I think that's appropriate. Just in the same way during the civil rights era, we saw individuals which were setting up pseudo sanctuary cities for Jim Crow laws that had to be essentially brought forward and said, you cannot, as an individual in the United States elected to office, flagrantly violate and essentially flip off federal law because you want to make some kind of a political point. It doesn't work that way. In fact, the Civil War was fought in large part to make sure that federal law regarding human rights are in fact enforced. And regarding illegal immigration in this country, with the way the Trump administration is tackling it, I agree with Mike that the immigration system needs to be reformed. I would say the best way initially would be getting rid of that 10-year moratorium. If you are kicked out of the country for immigrating illegally, that you should just be allowed to go to the back of the legal immigration line. But as far as the present enforcement right now, the sanctuary city stuff and the flagrant violation of federal law seems to be the target of this administration.
Mike, do you see a difference this time around? It seems like ever since Trump got into the Oval Office, there has been a spotlight on immigration.
Yeah, well, I mean, he ran on it, Don, right? I mean, there was only two issues that everybody really cared about, the economy and immigration, if you talk to anybody or in any exit poll that you looked at. But the difference has been, and again, this is me more now talking to immigration attorneys across 3 different states, some that have represented some clients. It has been about, there's already laws on the books, right? The Trump administration, Alien Enemies Act, dusting up an old 1798, law and trying to put it out into practical use with respect to warrants of what ICE can do in terms of administrative warrants versus judiciary warrants. Like there's creative legal strategies in how they're doing the enforcement. I think there is some over spotlighting at times of immigration enforcement because it is President Trump. I mean, in 2013, the ACLU wrote a scathing report about President Obama, and 84% of folks that were in immigration courts didn't even have an opportunity to actually see a judge. So, and this is from the ACLU's website. This is not from Mike Leon. Mike Leon doesn't work for the ACLU. So this was back in 2013. And I think we live in a different age now where social media is able to spotlight more stories. People are able to push things out more to the mainstream, and people were able to catch that, post that, reshare it without verifying it. So I do think that there's a little bit of like this overtelling of the story. But I also think President Trump, his own words, has said he wants to deport 15 million people. They want to increase the numbers. If you want to increase the numbers, the only way you're able to do that is by disrupting people that are going through what they used to consider the legal process. That means people that are here illegally but are going to their appointments. And we've seen videos of that, of folks, ICE being confronted with folks that are at their immigration appointments with their attorneys. And then the immigration attorneys have to go out there to the media and kind of articulate what it is or the confusion that they're feeling for their clients. So President Trump has said this. He ran on this, like Tony said, mass deportations, 15 million people he wants to deport. I don't know if we're going to get to that number. Obama only got to about 3.1 million, but this is something that he ran on. This is what the country elected him for. I don't agree with some of the enforcement part of it, But I do agree with that the system is broken and we need to figure out a pathway to citizenship, because immigrants contribute largely to our economy by any number that you look at, from the American Immigration Council all the way on to the CBO. The projections are in the trillions of what immigrants contribute to our economy. We have to figure out a way to make immigration work for this country.
All right, Tony, here's a couple of numbers for you. Illegal border crossings saw a 95% decrease from March 2024, which is the lowest monthly figure in U.S. history. And from January 20th through April 1st, there was a 99.9% decrease in the number of illegal immigrants released into the country compared to the same period last year. Tony, that's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and it also showcases that the Langford bill, which Mike referenced a little bit earlier here, there were two sides to that bill. There was the increase in funding and hiring more agents and funding certain immigration courts to make processes easier regarding deciding who did and didn't qualify. But also there were all of these threads, and when the president could and couldn't close the border, when the Homeland Security Secretary could and could not close the border, certain quotas and influx, 7,000 per day before the president could even begin to ask, man, maybe we should consider, closing certain areas of the border. And so those kinds of policies weren't necessary. All you need is the executive to uphold federal law. And one of the most basic parts of Article 2 includes enforcing the borders of this country. Now, that said, I think that when you're looking at the implementation of these particular policies, and you're looking at the kind of the grand scope, the psychological argument we're having now, which is, well, what should we really do about immigrants? And this is where I would push back against Mike a little bit. It's this conflation of the terms illegal immigration and immigration. Yes, immigrants make up a huge part of the economy of the United States. That is very different than saying illegal immigrants make up a huge part of the economy of the United States. Because to participate in the United States economy, I have to have some skin in the game. I have to have a certain number of things that a sovereign citizen is supposed to have, that someone here on a legal visa is supposed to have, not just protections for me, but protections for my employer. And one of the issues we're seeing with a lot of these immigrant or illegal immigrant run economies, especially regarding farms and food processing plants, is that people are being paid essentially slave wages, which is disgusting. And you can say, well, that would make food prices go up. I'm not going to get over the fact that there are individuals who are, you can talk about undercutting Americans in the economy, being paid $2 an hour to pick tomatoes or to pick strawberries. That's inhumane. That should not be appropriate just because we think that is. And that's one of the reasons why I'm for reforming the immigration system itself, so that we create an opportunity for individuals to come in here legally and then actually be paid appropriate wages. I think that's something that a lot of Americans would support.
Okay, Mike, let me get your response to what Tony is saying in the context of that the Trump administration apparently is working on a plan to create a temporary pass or permit for illegal immigrants employed in agriculture and other certain sectors as well. I mean, is Trump sort of acknowledging that his policies might have an impact on the U.S. economy?
Yeah. Don, you answered the question. I don't even know if I need to take a turn here, because look, back to Tony's point, and Tony, I'm glad you landed the plane on. I was going to hammer you, Tony. I'm just kidding. You landed the plane on what is actually at the core of this. Like, look at the construction industry down here in Florida, right? Almost 11% of the workforce here is foreign born, versus I think it's about 6.5 or 6.7% is U.S. born. That's immigrant labor. Those are but the wages that they're making,
legal or illegal immigrant labor, because it's a question.
Exactly. No, and I agree with you. And that's what I'm saying. Like, we're not paying these folks legal wages, but also, are they legal or are they illegal? And I think back to your question, Don, of like, is the president realizing this? I hope that this does provide some relief in the agriculture space and the construction space, because there are a lot of industries that rely on folks that are coming here. Let's be honest. They've come here illegally. And then when they're here in the previous administration, they were allowed to do certain things with respect to seeing an immigration attorney, going to court hearings and stuff like that. The Trump administration has just changed that policy to say, you've already violated the law. You're here illegally. You cannot come back in here. That's the difference. I think people are missing that one key difference here. The previous administration was like, see an immigration attorney, let's figure this out in court. It's a civil offense, et cetera, et cetera. This administration has said, no, you violated the law of this country. It's a law thing. Like, it's not even an R&D thing. This is a law thing. This is what they've decided to do. I think the president has gotten heat from folks in those sectors in the agriculture and construction. I happen to know a few in the construction industry that are in the New York, New Jersey that happen to have the ear of the president from yesteryears. They have said the same thing, that they're like, you're going to kill my workforce. But back to Tony's point, right? Legal or illegal, and also what are we paying them? Because a lot of the times these folks are working for wages that are slave in essence. I do agree with Tony. Like they're not earning a decent wage, and the money that they are sending back to folks that live in Mexico or Guatemala or any of the triangle countries is paltry in terms of what they should be making and what they should be earning in terms of a meaningful wage. Hey everybody, Mike Leon from the Can We Please Talk podcast. Thank you so much for watching this clip. Do me a favor, please, for me, I beg you, hit subscribe. It's right there. I think it's right there in the corner. Do me a favor, hit subscribe. You're gonna get more content from us over at Can We Please Talk.